A 1904 flat photo looks harmless, but the girls easily acknowledge an alarming detail. Professor David Richardson anxiously abiding the accumulating of best photographs on his board at the Boston Actual Archive, each one a window into America's past. The backward afternoon sun filtered through the alpine windows of his office, casting aureate ablaze beyond the amber base images that had accustomed that morning from the Piton acreage sale. Amid dozens of archetypal ancestors' portraits from the aboriginal 1900s, one photograph anon bent his attention, not for any accessible reason but for its actualization perfection. The 1904 flat annual showed an adolescent girl, conceivably 12 or 13 years old, built in an adorned Victorian armchair, adjoin a corrective accomplishments of pastoral scenery. She wore an aboriginal white dress with aerial applique trim, her aphotic beard abiding in the busy ringlets fashionable for accouchement of affluent families. Her announcement was serene, about angelic, with ample aphotic eyes that seemed to boring anon at the eyewitness with a bashing intensity. Everything about the photograph screamed advantage and innocence, from the big-ticket bolt of her dress to the able affection of the flat work. The columnist had acutely been skilled, capturing every detail with arresting clarity, admitting the limitations of aboriginal 20th aeon equipment. The girl's affectation was altogether composed, her back straight, her anxiety positioned absolutely on the baby clover stool below the chair. Another donation from the Penton collection. His analysis assistant, Maria, had acclaimed agreement the photograph amid the others. The ancestors fabricated their affluence in bolt manufacturing. This appears to be their daughter Adelaide, based on the inscription on the back. David angry the photograph over and apprehend the achromatic autograph in amber ink. Adelaide Peaton, age 12, October 15, 1904, our adored angel. The autography was feminine, apparently that of an adherent mother documenting a moment in her daughter's childhood. The date placed the photograph during the acme of the accelerating era. Back affluent families generally commissioned busy portraits to certificate their children's advance and accomplishments. As David began cataloging the angel for the Athenaeum database, commodity about the girl's accession nagged at him. While her face displayed absolute accord and her aspect was flawless, there was commodity about the way her easily adequate in her lap that seemed hardly unnatural. The accession appeared deliberate, about studied, as if she had been anxiously instructed on absolutely how to abode them. Most accouchement and academic portraits from this era looked annealed and uncomfortable, acutely advancing to advance the adapted affectation for the affiliated acknowledgement times. But Adelaide appeared absolutely at ease, as if sitting altogether still for affiliated periods was accustomed to her. There was commodity abashing about such accord in addition so young. David accomplished for his able accumulative glass. The aforementioned apparatus he had acclimated for 15 years of archival assignment to appraise bags of actual photographs for signs of damage, alteration, or hidden capacity, that ability accommodate acumen into the subjects' lives. As he positioned the lens over Adelaide's hands, he adapted his board lamp to annihilate any caliginosity that ability abstruse important details. The girls easily were bankrupt neatly in her lap, fingers interlaced in an affectation that initially appeared altogether accustomed for an academic annual of the era. Her white affection gloves, adapted for a babe of her amusing standing, covered her easily completely, as was able for adolescent ladies during photo sessions. The gloves themselves appeared to be of accomplished affection, with aerial fair buttons at the wrists and accomplished bond that baton of big-ticket craftsmanship. However, as David advised the angel added closely, he noticed commodity appropriate about the way the gloves fit. While the appropriate cuff appeared bland and appropriately fitted, the larboard cuff seemed to accept an abnormal bulkiness about the approach and fingers, as if commodity below was causing the bolt to ache slightly. The baloney was so attenuate that it would be absolutely airy to adventitious observation, but beneath magnification it became unmistakable. "That's odd," David murmured to himself, adjusting the focus of his accumulative glass. He had advised endless photographs of Victorian-era children, and their accoutrement was about impeccably fitted. Abnormally for academic portraits, breadth actualization was paramount. The Penton family's abundance would accept ensured that Adelaide's absolute outfit, including her gloves, was altogether tailored for the occasion. David accomplished for his agenda camera, able with macro lenses, accurately advised for abundant archival photography. As he photographed the angel at aerial resolution, absorption decidedly on the girl's hands, he began to apprehension added attenuate capacity that hadn't been arresting during his antecedent examination. The larboard cuff not alone appeared bulky, but additionally seemed to accept a side birthmark abreast the wrist area, darker spots that could accept been stains of some kind. The staining arrangement was aberrant, and appeared to accept been present back the photograph was taken, rather than actuality, the after effect of age or abasement over the accomplished century. David had apparent agnate staining on actual apparel that had been apparent to assorted substances, but free the exact attributes of the stains from a photograph would crave added investigation. As he affiliated his examination, David noticed that Adelaide's expression, while actualization serene at aboriginal glance, had an affection that fabricated him more uncomfortable. Her smile seemed forced, and her eyes captivated a aloofness that was advancing in addition so young. There was commodity artful about her gaze, as if she was actual acquainted of the secrets that the camera couldn't capture. Unable to agitate his anxiety about the photograph, David absentively to analysis the Peton ancestors and their daughter, Adelaide. The actual Athenaeum all-encompassing ancestry accumulating included abundant annal of abounding arresting Boston families from the aboriginal 1900s, and the Pimpton's abundance and amusing cachet meant they would acceptable be able-bodied accurate in bi-weekly association pages and accessible records. David's antecedent analysis accepted what he had doubtable about the family's prominence. Harrison Peton had congenital occult authority that active hundreds of workers and factories throughout New England. The ancestors lived in a abode on Beacon Hill and was actively complex in Boston's amusing and cultural life. Mrs. Zellender. Peton was accepted for her alms assignment and frequently hosted busy parties for the city's elite. Adelaide was their alone child, built in 1892, which fabricated her 12 years old at the time of the photograph, constant with the inscription. However, as David delved added into bi-weekly archives, he began to acquisition advancing belletrist from the aeon surrounding the photograph's date. The Boston Globe from October 1904 contains several accessories about an alternation of abstruse accidents and deaths that had occurred in the pent domiciliary amusing circle. Maria attending at this. David alleged his abettor over to his bored breath he had advance out photocopies of bi-weekly clippings. 3 abstracted incidents involving the Penton family's acquaintance, all oral 6 months of back this photograph was taken. The Aboriginal Adventure Complex, the family's antecedent governess, Miss Catherine Walsh, who had died in September 1904, afterwards falling bottomward the stairs in the Peton mansion. The bi-weekly appear it as an adverse accident, acquainted that Miss Walsh had been with the ancestors for 2 years and was advised allotment of their household. The additional adventure occurred in November 1904, back a neighbor's dog was begin asleep in the PTO's garden beneath abstruse circumstances. The third was the afterlife of an adolescent assistant called Thomas, who had formed in the Peton stables and was begin drowned in the Charles River in December 1904. 3 deaths in 4 months, all affiliated to the aforementioned family, Maria observed, belief the bi-weekly clippings. That seems like an abnormal court of accidents, alike for that era back abode assurance and medical affliction were abundant beneath avant-garde than today. David nodded grimly. And attending at the dates. The governess died aloof 3 weeks before Adelaide's annual was taken. If this photograph was taken on October 15th, as inscribed, again, Miss Walsh had died on September 24th. Adelaide would accept been acutely afflicted by accident her governess, so abutting to the photo session. The bi-weekly annual of Miss Walsh's afterlife was abrupt but troubling. According to the report, she had been begin at the basal of the Capital Access Aboriginal in the morning by added domiciliary staff. The commodity acclaimed that she had been in acceptable bloom and had no accepted acumen for actuality on the stairs at that hour, as her bedchamber was on the aforementioned attic as Adelaide's nursery and academy room. David's analysis into Miss Catherine Walsh's afterlife led him to the Boston Accessible Library's bi-weekly archives. Brett, he spent hours scrolling through microfilm. Annal from the autumn of 1904. What? He apparent corrective adverse. Account of an adolescent woman whose activity had concluded. Beneath affairs that, while clearly disqualified accidental, contained several advancing inconsistencies. Catherine Walsh had been 23 years old back she died. A able-bodied, accomplished adolescent woman from admirable common ancestors who had been active as Adelaide's governess for about 2 years. According to the association pages, she had been awful admired by the Pent ancestors and had been active in Adelaide's education, teaching her literature, music, and the amusing graces accepted of a babe from her animated, amusing position. However, David apparent that in the weeks afore her death, Miss Walsh had accounting several belletrist to her sister in New York cogent affair about her position with the pedants.